listen.
What's going on, my little book commanders? I know that intro doesn't sound quite like Elvira's did back in the 80s. I'm not really built like Elvira either. Take that how you will. But this is nonetheless going to be an all 1980s Book Commander podcast. Why? Because I'm sick and tired of getting online every single day when I'm on social media. It's pro-President Trump, anti-President Trump, blue wave, hate, nothing but hate and just vile stuff. And so I thought I would travel back to the 1980s, which I consider to be the greatest time period of this country. Maybe other than World War II, but culturally speaking, we've been through this. The 1980s was the bomb.com. You had great TV shows. Come on, man. Knight Rider. Kit. You know what I'm saying? Excuse me. Miami Vice. We had the movie Top Gun. We had Dukes Hazzard. Man, we had it all going on, son. And we had Timeout Arcades. We had music. Look, speaking of arcades. All right. The crew here at Studio 39, which is the people behind the Book Commander podcast, they have dug up a photo from a Timeout Arcade back in the 80s. And I'm going to warn you straight up out there in internet land, once you see this slide and once you see this photo, you will never forget it. You cannot unsee it. So if you do not want your 80s arcade experience ruined forever, I don't know if I'd say ruined, but you're not going to be able to unsee this photo. I'm going to take a drink of coffee and give you folks, fine folks out there, a moment to log off if you don't want to see this photo, because there's no going back. Seattle's best this morning. All right. Not Starbucks, Seattle's best. Here we go. There's no going back. What is going on in this picture right here? I mean, beside the obvious, you have Pac-Man. You have another arcade there. I can't really tell what it is, and I feel bad for that. But what is going on? This dude, first of all, it's typical 80s of a guy. He's got the short shirt on showing the abs off. He's got the mullet. He's got the 80s stash going on. The hat, of course, and the stonewashed jeans. The women behind him. I mean, what is this? Is it a competition? Is this a pre-party show before bikini competition? What is this? And the guy that makes this photo is the guy on the Pac-Man machine. Whoever you are, if you're out there, brother, you are my hero for today, because this dude don't even know what's going on, and he's 2 feet away. You would think this guy knows what's going on, but he has no idea. One of these women in the photo, is it his girl? You know what I'm saying? Is this Rick right here with the hat on? And is this Jesse over here on the Pac-Man machine? He done took Jesse's girl. What is going on in this photo? That's the beautiful thing about the 80s. Nobody really knew what was going on. It was just fun, dude. Fun. We had Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, and people cared about that on Election Day and before and after Election Day. Nobody gave a rat's rear end who the President of the United States was. The whole Cold War thing was going on. That was kind of in the back of the minds of everybody. But other than that, it was chill, bro. As my little nephew Taylor would say, it was chill. Fortnite King, by the way. I don't understand Fortnite. I'm not going to get into Fortnite. I'm just going to say, look, for you kids out there playing Fortnite who think you're cool and you're wearing the headsets, and Dawson, my boy, I know you're out there. I'm not putting Fortnite down in that respect. If you folks are out there in internet land, you play Fortnite, forgive me. But there's never going to be a night when you're playing Fortnite and it gets as epic as this. I'm sorry. I play Battlefield 5 online with my boy James, and we have fun, but nothing like this. That's just craziness. So, I mean, what is going on in that picture? I want to know. There's no caption with it, so we have no idea what's going on. It reminds me sort of that movie Pixels that everybody else hates, but we love here at the house because there's so much 80s involved in that movie, and we actually like Adam Sandler. I know he catches a lot of heat or whatever, but he's funny. Anyway, let's talk about the 80s because, again, there was really no real hate going on in the 80s. You know what I mean? Everybody was getting along. It was just a cool time, man. You had Dungeons and Dragons, which I played when I was a kid. By the time I'd hit, 12 years old, video games had pretty much taken over. But I remember playing D&D just because it was the only game in town. And, it was fun. Not necessarily the game itself, but getting together and hanging out with your friends and you got snacks there. Nobody does that crap anymore, dude. It's depressing is what it is. I'm smiling, but I'm crying inside. You know what I mean? Timeout Arcades. I'm forever telling my kids about Timeout Arcades. How cool they were. They will never get to experience that. And it sucks. You know what I mean? We'll watch documentaries and things like that, and I'll tell my kids, oh, yeah, man, used to be able to, because we have like the full-size Pac-Man arcade here at home, and we have a bunch of the older games, but it's still not 100% the same because you used to be able to go into the arcade and you're playing a game, you know what I'm saying? And people just come and put quarters up there. They got next. That's how it used to roll for you millennials. When you had next game, you just laid a quarter down. And I was sure to put that in my upcoming book, The Outer World, that I'm working on. But there was just something cool about it. Somebody'd be on there straight shredding a video game. And then there's this whole group of people around watching and cheering. And you just don't get that with the online games today. You don't get it. I don't care how much better the games look today. They're missing the human element. And that is the part that depresses me. It really does. I'm glad to see there seems to be like this trend where the 80s is coming back. And I'm glad to see it. I'm glad. I hate all the freaking remakes that they're coming out with of 80s movies. If they do another Dirty Dancing besides Havana Nights, which was horrible, if they do another one, I'm going to go insane. If Top Gun sucks, I'm just going to beat my head against the wall because I'm sick of seeing movies getting ruined from the 80s. If they ever do another Goonies or E.T., man, I don't know. They have just trashed the 80s. They keep going back to the 80s. I don't really know how to explain it. It's sort of like society and the people that are running society today and like the influencers, if you will, realize that this time period sucks bad. They realize that there's no creativity whatsoever in this time period. And so they keep diving back to the 80s. The Goldbergs, which is an excellent show on TV, is excellent because they dove back into the 80s. And people just miss that time period. Stranger Things, great show, but they borrow tons from the 80s. Anybody that sees that show and knows about the 80s can't dispute that fact. They borrow a lot from the 1980s, and that's part of the reason the show is so good, I think, is there's like this appeal with the 80s that you don't get today. You know what I mean? You can't turn the TV on and see Knight Rider again. You can watch the original, but they tried to redo that, I think. If I remember it correctly, it was like a Ford Mustang or something. The show was terrible. Because you can't redo something that's that classic. You just can't do it. It is what it is, and it's never getting any better. Which is why I hope they don't remake the Goonies. I really do. I think there's a Fright Night remake. I applaud the effort. I applaud the fact that Hollywood and these major networks and influencers realize that the 80s was so cool. But keep your hands off the stuff, man, because you're not ever going to be able to touch that. And my whole thing is, how did we get to the point where we're at now from the 1980s? My daughter asked me one time, because I'm always rambling, man, the 1980s is so cool, so cool. She says, Dad. She calls me Dad, not the book commander. Thank God. She calls me Dad still. She says, what's one thing about the 80s that you didn't like? And my reply was, in the 80s, we knew how cool it was, but we didn't really appreciate it because we didn't ever see it changing. You know what I mean? You used to be able to ride your bike to your friend's house and play Atari. Doesn't happen anymore. And back then, I would have appreciated it a lot more had I known that it was eventually going to change. Part of that was me being a kid and not realizing how the world worked. And part of it was people just, I guess, assumed it was going to be that cool forever. And, like Miami Vice cool, which they've also remade as a movie, and it's also terrible. You just didn't realize how cool it was. I can remember the last time I went into a Timeout Arcade. There was one here in the mall, and this was back in the early 90s, I want to say. There was still one hanging around. And we went in then. I went in. My wife and I were dating at the time. We went in. No, we weren't. No, I don't think so. I wasn't with my wife at that time. Went into the Timeout Arcade and didn't know it was going to be the last time. Didn't know the place was going to shut down. I went in, and for those of you who are not from the 80s, you used to be able to go into the Timeout Arcade, and it was almost like a tunnel, or it gave the illusion that you were going somewhere else. And you walk in, and this place is incredible. They had like the bowling alley, glow-in-the-dark, black light, or whatever you want to call it, carpet. And so you would see some of it glowing, and they had stuff on the walls that was glowing, and just arcades everywhere. We just got back, actually, from Tennessee, vacation in Tennessee. We go there all the time. Love Tennessee, man. For those of you who are living in Tennessee, you guys are so lucky. But we just got back from Tennessee, and while we were there, we went to a huge Dave & Buster's. And my kids were excited at Dave & Buster's, you know what I mean? They love it. And I'm like, this place sucks compared to Timeout Arcade. It just sucks. They got the big prize counter now, and everything's digital, and you got to activate a card, and the games are all geared towards who can get what tickets, and there really no retro games there. Like, they had one huge Pac-Man arcade. And again, it was huge. It looked like a skyscraper almost. And for that second, I'm like, man, that's cool. And then I realized, nah, I'd rather have a classic cabinet, So kids today, man, and teenagers today, they just don't know. They don't realize what they're missing out on. Again, I play Xbox. I play Battlefield 5. If you guys ever want to add me, and you play Battlefield 5 on Xbox One, Bad Juju DD, no spaces, Bad Juju DD, not my gamer tag, it's my son's. He's known as Bad Juju. Figure that one out. But here we go. Phone's always ringing. All right. So, and as cool as it is to get online and game, I'll get on the guy that runs the tech here at Studio 39, James, been my best friend since middle school. And we play online a couple of times a week. We're pretty serious about it. I'm a huge history buff, and it's a World War II game, so it's a perfect fit. However, it's just not as cool as going to the arcade used to be. See, we were in the middle school. We used to walk a great deal to get to a Double Dragon arcade, or when Altered Beast and Golden Axe were on arcades, we used to go and play. And this was back in the late 80s, early 90s. there's a different feel and there's a different element to the arcade games today. Like I said, we have one of the replica cabinets, because the original Pac-Man cabinets are like $3,000 or $4,000, and we're not dropping that kind of money on a video game in this house, saith the wife. She put the brakes on that one real quick. But we did drop several $100s and get a replica full-size Pac-Man arcade. And it's cool for what it is. You know, it looks good where it's sitting. It's a good conversation starter. Every so often, my friend Mike will be over here. Will you at me there, Mike Jenkins? And we get a Pac-Man tournament going on. He usually smokes me. He's really good at Pac-Man. Me, not so much. Not so much, man. Smitten for that pink ghost. Don't remember which one that is, and she seems to always catch up to me. But anyway, the whole style, like, look at the music. Let's pivot over to the music for a second from today as compared to the music in the 80s. Were there terrible 80s songs? Oh yeah, there were a lot of them. But the classics from the 80s, the Police. Let's just go to the Police, for example. Right? AC/DC, which I mentioned in my upcoming book, The Outer World. ZZ Top. I'm a huge ZZ Top fan. My family gets tired of hearing it in the car, to be honest with you. It just pulverizes the music that's coming out today. I don't care if it's rock. I don't care if it's hip-hop, whatever. It was so much better back then, man. The movies. The first time that I saw a movie in the 80s, not the first movie I saw, but the first time I saw it with kind of like adult eyes. You know, I was to the age where I kind of knew what was going on, was Vamp. Vamp scared the crap out of me. I won't lie to you folks out there. But there was also something about the movie that brought me back over and over and over and led me to The Howling. And there's a lot of 80s horror that I actually put into my own writing, or influences from, I should say. But, man, the movies, I mean, look, Dirty Dancing, E.T., Goonies, Roadhouse, one of the most underappreciated movies of all time. Roadhouse had everything, son. There are a few scenes in there that my kids can't watch, so I don't watch it with them. But Roadhouse is the bomb, son. Jean-Claude Van Damme. I mean, who do we have in 2019 that compares to Jean-Claude Van Damme back in the 80s? The Rock is the highest paid actor we have, and he couldn't hold Jean-Claude Van Damme's jockstrap. That dude was the bomb back then, you know? Still makes movies now, and they're still good, but back then, man, he was like immortal. You know? You just don't. He was like a Spartan from the movie 300. This dude was off the chain, son. And you just don't have it anymore. You know, you look at the cars. Look at the beautiful cars from... Yeah, there were some bad ones. You know, there were the Ford Pinto and the, what is that, Chevette. They were rough, boy. But then you had the Fiero, right? The freaking Fiero that looked like a Ferrari, but it was made for people that couldn't afford a Ferrari. I wish I had a Fiero outside right now that ran. DeLorean. Look at the cool cars that came out in the 80s, and now look at them. Right? They look like little broom closets that run on ethanol. Nah, man. Put that up against a Trans Am. I'm just talking about speed. I'm talking about the cool factor. What's cooler than a Trans Am or an IROC or something with T-tops? Come on, man. Seriously. What's cooler than that? For that price range, I'm saying. Everything was cooler in the 80s. School was cooler. People played sports. They didn't play video games. There was like a focus on team-based sports. Girls strived to cheerlead. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of cheerleading. I'm just going to catch some heat for this. Not a huge fan of cheerleading as a whole because there's really no future in it. But back then, that's all the girls were striving to be, either cheerleaders or really book smart. What are they striving for now? Exactly. I don't know. Team sports are dying off. People continue to say they're not, but I mean, you look at attendance, you look at youth enrollment of all sports, from baseball down to football. People aren't playing sports like they used to play them, son. And there was no internet. My God, there was no internet. The downside to that is the old book commander couldn't podcast in the same way that he does today. But who knows, I might be on some obscure AM radio station somewhere. You know, I might be the opening act for Elvira. I'm just saying. It's hard to say, but Creep Show. Come on, man. You got to be a fan of Creep Show. I remember seeing that with my buddy John Hayes. And we walked out of that place. We didn't trust anybody for a week, you know. We didn't go swimming for like a year after that movie. The Raft on Creep Show 2, I think. I had nightmares, son. Gosh, it was just a crazy time back then. We had this theater downtown. It wasn't like a Regal Cinemas, right? First of all, people weren't nuts. They weren't just going up in theaters acting a fool. And y'all know what I'm talking about with that. But tickets weren't $45 and a kidney. It was just different, man. Now everything's digital, everything's high tech. You go in, the tickets, like I said, $45 and a vital organ, or your firstborn child, and then you get in. They got the leather recliners, which my wife's a big fan of, by the way, when we get to the movies. But it's not the same. It's not the same as getting in on a cheap ticket and sitting in the cheap seats and watching an 80s movie. It's not the same. Prancer. My God, I must have seen that movie 100 times as a kid. 95 of which were against my will. But they always showed it free for some reason at the theater around Christmas time. And so there was like this huge line going all the way down Main Street. And it was like a requirement for us to go, you know. So we went and recited the movie word for word. I keep coming back to the game. So as cool as the movies were, as cool as the music was, and the cars and everything else, the style, you know, you had the, what are they called? Like the tropical looking shirts, the Hawaiian Tropic, the Panama Jack, and the Oakley jackets and stuff like that. That I don't know how to explain the color of them if you've never seen them. They look green until the light hit them, but y'all know what I'm talking about if you're from the 80s. But I keep coming back to the games. I can remember being a kid and we didn't have, as my mother-in-law says, a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. We didn't have a lot growing up, folks. And I can remember one Christmas. It was either a Christmas or a birthday. I don't remember which. Could have been my birthday. Get this package in the mail. And it's from my dad, who I hadn't talked to in forever. And I busted that sucker open, and it was an Atari 2600. The Vader style with the Pac-Man game. Boy, I was parading around that place telling all my friends about it. And then that led to borrowing games back and forth. And it was like a community of kids getting together and borrowing games. And you just don't have it in a digital age. Like I said, the internet, as good as it is for certain things, I'm able to attend college and work on a graduate degree because of the internet. I'm able to podcast because of the internet. I'm able to make my living as an author primarily because of ebooks, which you of course need the internet for, but it has destroyed so many things. It has destroyed going to the arcades. Here we had a bowling alley that had, I'm sorry, not a bowling alley, a skating rink that had probably 100 or more arcades. And so half the people went to skate and the other half went to play arcades. And the internet has totally destroyed that. And then Saturday nights, going to the movie store, getting your favorite VHS, those days are history. Or to the record store, those days are over. The internet has destroyed so much. This digital age that we're living in now. Wow, we are sitting at 26 minutes. Wow, I need to wrap this up soon. I'm just rambling about the 80s. But that's easy to do. The digital age, it's not all that it's cracked up to be. I mean, you look at childhood obesity spiking through the roof now. Kids are attached to their cell phones nonstop, basically slaves of a cell phone, mobile device now, because they're not even really used to make calls anymore. I don't know, man. It's getting back to what I told my kids, I wish we would have known, because I would have taken every moment in and enjoyed every single moment. I probably wouldn't have slept any during the 80s. I would have been on TV or something. This dude don't ever sleep. What's going on? He got some kind of illness going on. We try and put him down and go to sleep, and he just won't do it. I would have stayed awake all through the 80s and slept through the 90s, and probably woke up depressed to the 2000s, because I don't really know when the coolness ended, but I suspect it started ending in the very, very early 90s. And then, of course, later in the 90s with the addition to the internet. So, anyway, that has been my ramble and my rant. If you guys missed the 80s, let me just throw this in here. Again, The Outer World is a project I'm working on. And it is basically science fiction, but I'm also reliving the 1980s through this new book series. And it's been a blast. I'm already bringing in arcades and references to songs that I miss and vehicles that I miss, and it's just a culmination of everything that I miss from the 1980s, coupled with fantastic science fiction. So if you guys miss the 80s and you're into science fiction, if that's your thing, please look for it. It's coming out at the end of this year. Again, it's called The Outer World. Until next time, folks, God bless each and every one of you. This is the Book Commander. Let me switch over to my accounts here so you know how to find me. Hashtag Book Commander is the easiest way to do it. That works every time without fail. You get on Google, you get on Bing, you just put in hashtag Book Commander, or any social media, Instagram, Twitter, etc. You'll be able to find me by hashtagging Book Commander. You can visit my official website. There's several websites with my work. This is the only official one, johndavisbooks.wordpress.com. I'm in charge of that website and that website alone, and you can support me by reading my work. There's a lot of it available on the website for free, and there's also a lot on sale. You can subscribe to this podcast, and you can donate outright. If you don't have time to watch all the podcasts or do any kind of reading, but you have extra change under your couch cushions, you can go to johndavisbooks.wordpress.com. At the very top, there's a link where you can donate via PayPal. Be sure to include your name so I can thank you here on the podcast. Again, this is best-selling author John M. Davis, the old Book Commander, and right now I am missing the 80s. Something fierce. God bless.
Always send.